Hello, everyone, and welcome to Hit and Hustle from IrishSportsDaily.com. I'm your host, Greg Flammang, and with me, as always, is Jamie Uyeyama, Mr. Jamie University. It is Thursday, January 30th. Notre Dame has a new defensive coordinator in Chris Ash. They are hot in pursuit of Texas Tech's GM, James Blanchard, and there's a lot of other news going around the Notre Dame football team. There's talk of a new ACC deal that'll have them annually play two of Miami, Clemson, and Florida State. So we'll talk about all those things on the show today. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. If you like what you hear and you like what you've heard, please hit the like button. Please hit subscribe. Please hit the notification bell so whenever it is we are going live. Links to the podcast are in the description below. We are about 500 away from 10K subscribers. We would love it if we could reach that before spring practice starts. So share this show with your friends. If you haven't done so, please subscribe to the channel. Get the word out. You like our stuff, we do good content. That would really appreciate that. That would really help us out. And as always, the show is brought to you by ESQ Clothing, founded by Notre Dame alum Ge Wang. You've seen ESQ on all your favorite Notre Dame players and coaches. But boy, this is the type of year where it's like, check out what Marcus Freeman's wearing. If it's not Notre Dame's gear, if he's on a visit doing something, if he's wearing some nice clothes, it's probably ESQ. So they've got over a decade of making the best custom clothing available. ESQ will help you look and feel your best in 2025, from a perfect fitting suit or sport coat, shirt, or bomber jacket with a perfect tuxedo for winning season. Check out Ge's amazing work at esqclothing.com. Book an appointment to upgrade your wardrobe today. Mention ISD and get 10% off your entire purchase. Jamie, how you doing today? How are you feeling? How are you taking in all the news and everything that's going on around Notre Dame football?
I'm feeling great. Yeah, I'm feeling great. Like, obviously there's it's busy times. Like, it's because of the extended season, things get even a little crazier because it's like everything that was been waiting to kind of burst is there. But I think, obviously all like the portal stuff is done. Generally what the roster is going to look like for 2025. Obviously, there's going to be stuff in the spring and stuff too.
Yeah.
But you have a good idea of like where things are headed, and coaching carousel, you just got to let it kind of play out and see where things stand. And to me, it's always like kind of exciting. It would have been awesome for Notre Dame if Al Golden was stuck around, but I think when you have all this other stuff, I'm excited whenever there's like new. It's just like I want to see what happens.
Yeah, there's a lot of intrigue around the defense. A very strong unit. Obviously, we'll talk about Chris Ash in a second. I mentioned with John Bryce yesterday on the show we did, and if you haven't checked it out, please do so. It's on our channel. It's on our page. This was like an hour before Chris Ash was kind of reported as accepting the job. So, but we do talk about Chris Ash, and he said at that point he was kind of the target that everyone was looking at. So it's all still kind of topical, right? Like it hasn't actually been dated at all. We also talk about the GM position. That's a fascinating conversation to me. There were a lot of layers to that and what Notre Dame is looking for in their GM position and what it kind of means for the university to kind of go all in on the kind of department. So that's a really good interview if you haven't checked it out yet. But I mentioned with him at the start, like, I think the extended run that Notre Dame had in the playoffs, kind of people forgot, like, oh yeah, like there's portal stuff going on. There's coaching carousel going on. Like there's a lot of angst around this time of year that a lot of teams went through, already when we weren't really paying attention to that because we were covering a national title run for Marcus Freeman's football team. But they did make the hire of Chris Ash. And I have to say, Jamie, like, I think something that you said that aged well, the process was good in terms of who they targeted, the effectiveness or the efficiency, I should say, for which they targeted them. And then they go ahead and made a hire that they wanted to make. Kind of give a little bit more insight on that. And then we can talk a little bit more about Chris Ash and what this could mean for the defense.
Yeah, I think obviously the easy answer would have just been to immediately Al Golden leaves and promote Mike Mickens. And, time will tell whether or not like that was the right answer or not. But obviously Marcus Freeman like immediately identified what he thought he needed for the position, which he thought he needed like an experienced hand to kind of guide the defense, similar to an Al Golden. And right away, it was like, well, he went out and approached people. It wasn't like Chris Ash was the only candidate he talked to. Obviously, like they were involved with the Jim Knowles stuff that was going on in terms of him potentially leaving Ohio State and then going to Penn State. It pretty positive. He spoke with Jim Leonard, who was someone that obviously was on a list and someone who he's talked to about the job before. So there was a lot of things, moving parts there. And Ash was someone that he had interviewed previously when there was an open job, right? So I don't think this was, rushed, but it was done kind of like in the time that it needed to get done, because you really can't wait long. If it like went into next week, it's like, wow, you're just all of a sudden, it's not just people think recruiting, and that's somewhat of it, but realize that Notre Dame was already behind because they had the extended season when it comes to like doing stuff for next year, because that stuff is already going on. It's not that far away from spring ball, right? So when you're going to have a new defense in, you want to get that guy in, right away. You want to know like, hey, this is what we're maybe adding. This is what we're keeping. This is, what terminology, what we want to change, if we're going to keep most of the stuff the same and whatnot. There's so much that goes into it. So it needs to be a decision that happens quickly, but I think it was done pretty thoroughly, and you can't really argue with, the process that it was like one of these things. The days of Notre Dame waiting because they had to do like background checks, it took forever and ever. Like, those days are over.
Yeah. And I did make the comparison to like recruiting and how, fans kind of see their top target as like the guy that they want. And it's like the further you get kind of down that list, you kind of feel like Notre Dame is quote unquote settling. I think it's similar to recruiting though. Like Chris Ash was the first round of top targets that they were after. And just to add some context to people, it just for our own, just like to kind of put in your mind, like where Chris Ash was in the search for a new defensive coordinator. Mike texted us last Thursday, like he heard Chris Ash was a name last Thursday. So this was before Jim Leonard was kind of a thing. This was before Jim Knowles was a thing. Like he was early on in the process that Mike was hearing that name. So it just kind of goes to show, like for Notre Dame, he was kind of top of mind, top of list. And something that we always say regarding recruiting is Notre Dame has the guys that they want. And it's like, for us, it doesn't really matter how we slot them. It kind of is more informative. It's like these are top of the board prospects for the recruiting class and for the coaches and for the staff and everything. So like for me, when I judge Notre Dame's recruiting classes, a lot of the time it's like, are you landing your top guys? And I think this is kind of the same. It's kind of the same thing. Like whatever we think of Chris Ash, Marcus Freeman targeted him early, and then he was able to land him and get him in fold. His reasons are his reasons. Another thing that John Bryce told me yesterday was kind of interesting. It was not the biggest comment, and we didn't harp on it that much, but we talked about Jim Knowles. He was talking about culture, and he said there were some questions about Jim Knowles and the culture of the program. And I thought that was interesting because there are questions about Chris Ash and the culture that he's coming into, and can he fit into it? I just thought it was interesting. That is top of mind for Notre Dame. And he obviously passed that test, or they feel comfortable enough. They offered him the job and he accepted. So I thought that was interesting. You put something in 6 Thoughts on a Thursday today about the fact that he worked with Joe Rudolph at Wisconsin. And so Marcus Freeman would have talked to him about that. Kind of go into that a little bit and how you feel about those things.
Yeah, and just to add what you were saying about Jim Knowles too, right? Like that was something that I think was like pretty out there, that he had some internal disagreements with some guys on the staff at Ohio State. Like that was a thing. And he came in and they kind of handed him the reins, and he was the outsider. And he was like the first kind of outsider that they've kind of brought in that wasn't like connected to Day or Meyer in a long time to kind of run that show. And that's why they had like Kerry Coombs. One of the reasons they did it, because he was like an Ohio State guy. He was a Meyer guy, you know, worked with Day, all that kind of stuff. So it kind of made sense to, you know, they made that transition. They did the Mike Mickens thing, right? Where they gave him that role and it didn't work out. And then they brought somebody in, but there was friction there. And that is something that can happen. Yeah. So I think the thing with Ash and I think most people have seen that, you know, there were things at Rutgers, and obviously when you lose, everyone's always going to pick up the bad when things are going bad.
Yeah.
Right? So, but there was things at Rutgers that people were like, well, you know, he maybe how the players were treated, how things went there. He was negative, whatever, all this kind of stuff. And he definitely has like a reputation as like a guy who coaches like very, very hard, which, you know, can be a bad thing, but it doesn't necessarily have to be a bad thing. Right. And I think there is something to say that, like, you know, coming from where Urban Meyer is and how he ran his program and all that, and kind of taking that and being that guy and trying to be someone you're not when you're trying to run a program. And, you know, we mentioned it like briefly about the thing about like Chip Long, like not a guy who's probably meant to run a program, or at least at that time. I don't know how Chip Long might be a different person now, but like, I'm just saying at that time when it was like he was interviewing for head coaches, I was just like, I don't know if this guy's going to be like, I don't know what it's going to be like when he runs a program, like a completely opposite personality of like a Clark Lee. Right. And I think one thing, you know, is that Ash was on staff with Rudolph, Wisconsin from 2010 to 2012. Rudolph was at the tight ends coach for Wisconsin at that time. And that's a guy that when Ash was first the DB coach and then the defense coordinator the last 2 years. So he spent 3 years with him. You spend a lot of time there where you get a good idea of who a person is and what kind of coach they are, how they kind of treat people, all that. Yeah. Like whether or not like if this guy coaches hard or whether this guy is, you know, for lack of a better term, an a-hole, right? Like, you know, just a guy who maybe is just like, hey, this guy's, he doesn't treat people nice. He's a mean guy. He doesn't get the best out of kids. He does this, whatever. Obviously, that is not the case of what Rudolph thought, or else that's something that he would have expressed to Freeman. And obviously, Freeman, that'd be the first guy he talked to when he talked about, and I'm sure he talked to Rudolph about Ash previously when doing that, right? Like, because that's obviously one of those things that you want to find out right away about somebody, right? Like whether or not, like, you know, what kind of person this guy is, whether or not this guy will fit with the staff that you have right now in terms of like the chemistry and all of that, whether or not he's going to be able to coach, you know, and kind of embody the culture that you want to have within the program, right? And it's something that's important, and you need to kind of have that figured out. You need to find out about a guy's character. It's just like any job. You're going to find out like character references about somebody, because there's a lot of people who are like, man, this guy's great X's and O's, right? Or this guy, this guy, no one's a better computer programmer than this guy. But when they're not like a good, just like anything, right? Like, it's just like, you're not a good person. It's like, well, like people don't want to work with a surgeon who's like treats everybody like trash, right? Like it's whatever job you're in. That kind of stuff does matter, and it does. So if you bring in somebody and they aren't going to, you know, fit with everybody else and fit within the structure of the staff, you kind of need to know it. Obviously, that's someone that you vet right away. And you know what? And then sometimes you never know too, because someone can come in and things can change, and they're like, well, they're a different person than they were before, or whatever. Yeah. And then you got to adjust, but all you can do is talk to somebody who coached with them before for years and say, like, you know, what kind of guy is he? And obviously, if he gave him a thumbs down, he wouldn't have got the job.
Yeah. And I recommend everyone read Six Thoughts on a Thursday today, because you put some anecdotes in there and some comments from former players of Chris Ash at Texas. So there's a lot of good information in there about the kind of coach that he is. It's funny that because there are legitimate questions about his, you know, temperament and that sort of thing. anecdotally, like I've just seen a lot of things on Twitter that are getting shared around, like beat reporters from Rutgers saying they liked him, they liked working with him. There was a Texas fan in my comments yesterday who was like, "We loved Chris Ash. We were upset that Sarkisian didn't retain him after Tom Herman was fired. It worked out for Sarkisian; he made a very good hire at that point. But it's just like the people involved in the situations seem to have a good feeling about Chris Ash, or they have positive things to say. I thought that was interesting, right? Like these are non-solicited comments. Like I'm just noticing them, right? And so I think that's an interesting kind of thing that's going around. It's just, I don't know. I feel like initially there were the kind of those negative comments and those negative I don't want to say narratives, because I think it was these are true things, but there's also a lot of evidence that it's gone the other way. And so I think that's interesting. And look, it goes to show like he did get the job. So I think it was vetted by Notre Dame and they feel comfortable with the situation.
Hold on. I just want to add one more thing on Ash too, because I do think it's important because Chris Sabo, who's not in here today, Chris Sabo,
not here today.
Yeah, not here today. Was in just destroying Ash every single chance that he got, really, and not sugarcoating how he felt about it at all. And talking about how like things went at Texas, and I think it's not. First of all, it's not fair to say like it went bad there. They went from 98th in yards played 27th. I think that's a pretty good improvement. Went to 62nd on points per drive to 42nd. And, I talked to someone who, knows the program really, really well. Yeah. And really is like, has a good understanding. And he basically told me that the linebackers there were like an abomination. Those were his exact words. They were abomination. They were like, that's how bad they were at the position at that time. And yet they still found a way to like stop the run. Yeah. They were 11th in EPA per rush that year. They had some problems in pass, in coverage. They weren't like the best, pass defense at all. But also too, that was like a time where they had like one NFL guy in their secondary compared to like now where they got like 6 guys, right? Like it's different. And a lot of the guys who became like the studs for Sark on the D-line were like young guys then. And that was all they had was those young guys. They didn't have the depth, right? So it's a different thing. It's you're coming in at a different time. It's also the pandemic and all that. But he did like he basically went in. This was exact words too. He said he inherited an impossible situation and did a decent job.
Yeah,
I think that sounds pretty good. Obviously, he's inheriting a good situation in Notre Dame, and you see if he can keep the standard or maybe even elevate. We'll see.
Yeah. A question. I did the Tyler Wojak's Locked On Irish show yesterday, and he was asking me about this, and he asked me a question, and I'm curious to see what your answer is to this, and I'll tell you mine if it's different. What is the kind of the one thing that you feel like this is going to be something that works out for Notre Dame? Like one piece of data or one piece of, evidence or whatever it might be that you feel like it's going to work out for Notre Dame and Chris Ash?
One, I think that what he's done is, he's made everything better, but he's inherited different situations than what he has. I think when he's had the material, they've had like really like great havoc producing defenses where they've like been attacking. They've done like a great job of, creating negative plays and being like kind of taking it to the defense, but also like, playing well within the scheme, right? Like they do a good job of being like assignment sound and being smart about it. And that's kind of like the thing that I don't think there's going to be a drop off in like, hey, all of a sudden, wow, there's all these more busts now in Ash's defense or whatever.
Yeah.
And I think that to me is the main thing. If we're going to look at like all the things that Al Golden did, it's just like, there's so few mental mistakes within the defense. And I just think that standard is going to maintain at Notre Dame, where they're going to be really on top of things. And you're just not going to see that many, when it happens, you're going to be like, wow, you rarely ever see that happen. Like, it's going to be the same. And I think that probably is like, if there's anything, I think that is just so huge on defense. It's just so huge because there's so many times that defenses, and I look at there's some defense that are like statistically like pretty decent defenses, like an NC State or I would say even Louisville, right? Like I look at them and I'm like, wow, they do create a lot of havoc and they do these things, but they beat themselves a lot. They beat themselves a lot, and you don't want to have that defense. Who cares about all the havoc if you beat yourself, right? Like if you give up the big play that much, then, if you get beat because some guy's a stud, so be it, right? But like if you get beat because you beat yourself and you allowed it to happen because you didn't know what you were supposed to do on this play, and the guys out there were not assignment sound, they weren't playing fast, they weren't, understanding everything, then that is on coaching, right? Yeah. And I don't think that was something that happened at Notre Dame. And I think that's going to continue. So that's what I probably was most confident in.
Right. Like you save the points that you save, you don't know because they are so organized. I use the word with Notre Dame's defense, like the organized word, so many times because you just don't see guys running free in their secondary. You just don't see it. Right. And so you're saving points drive by drive because the shot play that the team want. I mean, a perfect example is the wheel route that Ohio State tried to run against Notre Dame, and Xavier Watts was all over it. Right, that's a perfect example. Like against another team, the safety gets fooled and it's a walk-in touchdown. Yeah, because he just has bad eyes
because they think it's a touchdown. Yeah,
right. And I think the one thing about Ohio State and then that game, they did hit that long pass play at the end, but that was Notre Dame making a choice of being vulnerable in a one-on-one situation. But like one thing that Ohio State didn't get in that game, they didn't get explosives. They didn't get just like that huge play. And it's because, look, to their credit, right? Like they were good enough and efficient enough to go all the way down the field. But like not every team is able to do that, to play at that level. And look, that's why they're the champions, right? Because they were able to get to that level. But like every other team that Notre Dame played, they just could not. And when you're not giving up explosives like that, you're making them execute play after play after play. And most teams can't. And that's what makes a good defense. Joshua Finn kind of hits it for me. And from what my answer was, last time Ash was D coordinator in a good situation, quote unquote, he coached a national championship defense. And for me, I know it was a while ago, right? I know it was 2009, 2010, 2013, 2014 when he was coaching like elite defenses, and he was coordinating elite defenses. To me, that ability to get not just one program, but two different programs to that elite level, I don't know that goes away. You can either coach it or you can't. And he was able to coach it. Again, on Ohio State, you got a lot of great ingredients. At Wisconsin, they're not that great, right? It's not like you're getting the five-star athletes that you're getting at a school like Ohio State or even Notre Dame, right? And he's able to coach elite defenses in that case. I think that is evidence that like this guy can coordinate a defense. He can coach a defense. And he did it for more than 1 year at those schools as well. Like to me, I know it was a while ago, but the fact that it's in there, it makes me feel like he can do it again. And I think Notre Dame is betting on that as well. The reasons that we can go into the reasons why he hasn't been a coordinator recently or why he was, not even a position coach in the NFL last year. We can go into that. And some of it is circumstance and some of it is just the way things go in coaching sometimes. And you kind of went over that in 6 Thoughts on a Thursday. I encourage people to check that out. It adds more context to the conversation. But I think the fact that he's done it before, it's like that's the reason that I feel like that's the reason I feel like there is confidence that this can work out. And I want to be clear, like all the concerns that we've had before, they're all still valid. And we've talked about them for the last couple of shows, right? We talked about him, I think, on Power Hour. We talked about him on Hit and Hustle on Tuesday. We've talked about those things. They all exist, right? This is not a surefire home run situation that Notre Dame has themselves in, right? We're just talking about why at this point, like in recruiting, right, where you sign a player and it's like, okay, this is where it might work out for Notre Dame. He is signed, he's on the roster. This is where it might work, right? We're kind of doing that with the DC right now. We've talked about some of the concerns we have. Now we're talking about some of the things that why we feel like this is going to work out for Notre Dame. I'm very fascinated. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I just wanted to add in too, because I'm thinking about that. And, like someone could bring up the counterpoint of being like, well, Brian Van Gorder was once like a great defensive coordinator or whatever. But I think if you're looking at the big difference between that hire and any other kind of like hire like this, Brian Kelly hired Brian Van Gorder. There was like a trust there because that was his friend.
Yeah.
That was his friend. Like, I don't think they went deep into X's and O's to make that hire. Like, I don't think that was a big part of the interview, and probably regretfully, like that was not something that, he was kind of prepared for. Right. And I think that was one of the things. It was like, he was not someone who adjusted well to the players that Notre Dame had. I mean, it wasn't the greatest situation he inherited either, but like, there was just a lot of things there that were like not a fit and made it not a fit and made that not work out. And it's just like Marcus Freeman hiring Al Golden, Marcus Freeman hiring Chris Ash. He's like interviewing them. They're talking about all these different situations. So if something has passed him by or he hadn't evolved to where, things are going on defense or what they need to defend or whatever, it's the conversation's over, so it's different. You can't really compare it to like the BVG kind of deal. Because I do think, there is like a very much a buddy system, right? Of like, oh, this is the guy or whatever. It's like, he's not just taking someone's word for it. He interviewed him and actually like went over all stuff.
John Falco, thank you for being here from Buffalo Bill country. Time doesn't concern me as far as coaching ability. It concerns me more that he may not be as familiar with today's college football offenses. Yeah, I think that's valid. Like, I think that's a valid, it's a valid concern. And we don't know how he's adjusted to the way the defenses are run now, right? It's a valid concern. Craig D, how is Ash as a recruiter?
Like,
I know he was recruiting coordinator. I think it was at Wisconsin. I believe he was that. So, but this, I've heard conflicting on this. I'm curious to get your thoughts.
Well, I think one of the things with, Urban Meyer doesn't hire a guy who's like a passenger.
That is very true.
So
very, very true.
There's no way he's a dud as a recruiter.
Right.
In saying that, where he is as a recruiter is extremely low on the list of like why you make this hire. And it's the same thing with, you didn't hire Mike Denbrock because of recruiting. You didn't hire Al Golden. That's
the person he's replacing. Al Golden is very lower on Notre Dame's,
he was not a guy. I mean, if you get it, like everyone said, if you get him on campus, he gets around you, he talks ball, you're going to be impressed by him. You're going to like all that kind of stuff. If you are someone who's really into that, that is going to be attractive to people, especially to like, I think the grad transfers, the guys who are a little bit more advanced, but he's not someone who is like, hey, let's FaceTime tonight and let's talk about, hey, do you want to play some Call of Duty?
You want to play some Fortnite, bro?
Yeah, it's not happening, right? So I think it's one of those things that I know that has been like the standard question for years and years, but I think it's just evolving now, especially because there's so much more involvement from the recruiting department than there was like before. And that wasn't even like an existing thing, like really before, where the coordinators and the position coaches were so critical, and they still are. I mean, the position coaches are still a very, very big part of it, but it's not the same as it was. It's not.
Yeah.
It's not the same as, you know. And the other thing is, you can't, in no world too, can you just hire somebody because it's like, man, this guy's an A+ recruiter. That guy better be able to coach.
Yeah.
Like, that guy better be able to coach, or else it's, I mean, who cares who's coaching?
Yeah, the landscape has kind of changed, and we're going to get to that in a second with with Notre Dame's search for a new GM, right? Things have changed, and I think being able to be an ace recruiter, like, this guy, we used to have conversations about, like, this guy kills it in Texas. This guy kills it in his region, right? Like that's not even a thing anymore. Like, we don't even discuss it that way. You can, it's more specialized. You can outsource that sort of thing to the recruiting department, right? Just like you can outsource your media company and what you need for your website and your small business, you can outsource that to the professionals. And there are no better professionals, Jamie, for you to do that than at the VSR Media, founded by Notre Dame football pregame host and Emmy Award-winning anchor Vahid Sadrazadeh. VSR Media provides professional and cinematic video and photo. Whether you're looking for a collegiate or pro-level highlight reel, have a personal story to tell, or aiming to diversify and grow your business, VSR Media specializes in short and long-form video storytelling, social media management, and website design. VSR Media also captures professional headshots, senior, and sports photos. Contact them at vsrmediacompany.com. Mention Irish Sports Daily to receive 20% off your first project. Visit them online or give them a call at 574-800-9106. I'll tell you what I'm fascinated in is the press conference that's coming up, to hear who's in charge of what's how things are going to be, because I do think Mike Mickens is going to be co-DC. First of all, here's a question for you. Do you think Mike Mickens will be at the press conference? Do you think that he will be, like, introduced as, like, this is a co-defensive coordinator of ours?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't know, because I don't know when they plan on doing it. If it's going to be, obviously, it hasn't been official. We're saying all this.
Right.
Nothing has been officially announced by that.
This may not happen for like a month.
Yes.
But there are questions that we won't know until the press conference. So I'm just
I think if they, you know what? Honestly, I don't think they will. If it's there, and it's not to like shield him away from anything. I think it's more about they've done this before with, like, Dale McCullough became associate head coach and this, whatever.
Yeah.
They didn't have, like, a press conference for it. You know what I mean? So I think in general, they try to, like, whatever, they do a good job. I mean, props to the, ND, like, sports information department and what they do. And, like, they give, like, a lot of access to more access to coaches than any time, like, during the Brian Kelly era. And that's, I'm really, really appreciative of that. But I think that having that, like, I don't think they would, because they haven't done that with anything else. And I imagine too that, like, obviously a bunch of people are getting raises, like, a lot of people are getting raises. And sometimes that means, like, a new title too. So there's probably going to be some other titles that are announced, at that time. Maybe there'll be, like, something in a press release from Mickens or whoever gets other raises or whatever. I bet, like, if Blanchard gets hired, he will have a press conference or something like that, like the new guys. But I don't think there'll be anything else. And it's interesting too, because I think the timeline's all kind of screwed up, because usually by now they used to do a thing where they would, like, okay, we're going to slowly introduce, like, the new transfers and, like, the guys who transferred in during this time. And then also they've done it with, like, early enrollees too, right? Of, like, give, access to that too. And I don't know if that's all kind of messed up now, because there's just so much more going on now, but I don't know. We'll see.
They'll get him in. they'll find a way. It just the
it'll be
timeline.
sometime,
Yeah.
but like I just mean like that kind of stuff was already kind of done, I think, by now, or at least in motion.
Yeah. I think and first, and to be clear, I don't think there's like a wrong answer to where like if Mike Mickens isn't there, then I don't think it's like bad on ND or whatever. I'm just curious, like, because they have made like Dylan McCullough like associate head coach and things like that, but this is like a coordinator thing, and I wonder if Marcus would feel like it's a solid for Mickens to be up there. I just think it's interesting.
Maybe.
So
I don't know.
Yeah, we'll monitor that. There's questions about like okay. There was a question here. Let me find it. From Caleb Collins asked, "Do you think Ash will run more quarters, or will he transition to more cover one like Notre Dame ran last year?" That's the sort of thing that I think gets answered in the press conference. Like, are you importing your own kind of system here, or are you just going to kind of piggyback on what Notre Dame has done from a scheme playbook standpoint, right? Like, he can still run quarters and stuff. Like, Notre Dame has those coverages in their defense right now. But that's like one of those questions that gets answered at a press conference. Like, what is your vision for this? What do you plan to do, right? And so that to me is why I think this press conference, among like, because it's different when like you bring in a offensive coordinator like Denbrock. You kind of know, like, all right, they're going to run a lot of their LSU stuff, okay? But Ash, he's not running anyone's stuff. So it's like, what is your plan here? So it's a very intriguing press conference coming up, and
Al Golden
continue to monitor that.
Very different thing too, because people didn't know. And if you watch Al Golden's defense from year 1 to year 2, they ran way more cover one in year 2 and year 3 than they did there. So I don't know. I think I think it would be stupid if you didn't run a fair amount of man coverage with the corners you have. Like I think you have Leonard Moore. You
can do a lot with him. You can do a lot,
right?
Yeah.
So, but there's also different things. Like I think people kind of. I mean, not that whatever. We don't need to get in the weeds of it, but it's like cover 4. A lot of stuff that he runs to cover 4 is like pattern match coverage. It turns into man. So it's not this. It's not the same of just being like you just stick in your zone and that's whatever. It's not like that. It's like it's one of those things too where you can look into and see how PFS says this is the highest bit of man coverage and this is this, but it's like, well, sometimes that might not even be a man coverage call. It might be like a different, like a match coverage call and whatever, right? So it's whatever. It gets complicated, but it just, the whole point is I think people should think he'll run a 4.25. He'll run at 4.25. I'm pretty confident we're going to see that.
Yeah.
And
by the way, Notre Dame does a lot of that.
Yes, that's their base defense is 4.25, right? So
yeah. The only thing I wonder, like things like and this, I don't know that this, I don't think this will get answered until we actually see them play, but like the way that like the field, so like Christian Gray, the way that they run the field is basically he'll play man with his back to the, everyone talks about him being off and him being such inside leverage there. And they play that way. They played that way with Cam Hart last year or the last couple of years as well, where they basically say we're closing the middle of the field to the field receiver, and we're going to play with our back to the quarterback, and that's how they do that. I wonder if like something like that, like Chris Ash is, I don't want to play that way. I want to play it a different kind of way with my my outside corner. That's like way into the weeds, but that's stuff that I think about.
Not that whatever, but this is for a future thing. We don't need to get into it, but I want to have a conversation about Christian Gray later on and whether or not you think that it might be better for him to move in the boundary.
Okay.
Because I think that's what I've been thinking about lately, but we'll talk about it at another time, but
okay.
Just simmer on that.
I'll tell you right now, I'm we'll simmer. Just a comment on that. I have questions about his ability to turn and run on the boundary. That would give me pause. But there's a lot to dissect there, right? The last, I truly believe like he broke down physically, not necessarily injury wise, but it was a long year, and he is not the biggest guy, and I think that physically he just lost a step, and he kept playing the same way. And also, like, again, I'll make this brief. The thing about, and Mike Denbrock said this about Will Fuller when he was at Notre Dame, it's like, why didn't you move him to the boundary? And because a guy that fast, there are very few teams in college football that can use the field the way that Notre Dame could use the field because of Will Fuller and the way that he could run. And that's why Notre Dame plays their coverage that way to the field the same way, because it's like, you know what? Throw it over my head. That's a far throw. There aren't a lot of quarterbacks that can make that throw. There aren't a lot of wide receivers that can actually separate like that. Yeah. And if you look at Christian Gray and the struggles that he had is when it was teams that were okay.
Teams that could do that. Yeah.
They played teams that were okay to throw the ball, a go ball to the field receiver. Right. And Jeremiah, that's why Jeremiah Smith is so dangerous, because he opens up that whole side of the field. Now, all of a sudden that is all open. And a lot of the time it's closed. Look at Penn State. Why did Christian Gray have such a good game against Penn State? Because they can't get to that side of the field, because they don't have the wide receivers to separate. That's why they tried to throw that in route against Christian Gray, and it didn't work. He is much better playing with when they are coming inside, whether it's an out route, whether it's an in route, a curl, whatever it might be. Anytime the ball went over the top, he struggled.
Yeah.
But there aren't a lot of teams that can do that. But you get in a national title game and you can.
Yeah.
All right. Let's transition to James Blanchard, the search for a new GM. Just like, I guess, a brief thing of where we believe things to be. We believe that there's negotiations going on. Not necessarily an offer, but negotiations on what the offer will look like. We believe that Texas Tech is not going to just let him go. I believe Texas Tech is going to try as hard as they can to keep him. And that is what's happening right now. And it's just like, can Notre Dame get to the number that James Blanchard needs for him to move on? If they get to that number, does he want to go to Notre Dame at that point? That's another part of this. He has to want to make the move. We know that USC was after him. And from what I understand, they had the highest bid and he turned them down. So it isn't always just about money for him. And that's where it stands. Right. I've heard some things about James Blanchard and their ability to.
Kristen sent to you and Tigger.
Oh my goodness.
630 game tonight at Milliken.
That's crazy. I apologize for that. 6:30 game tonight at Milliken, if you heard that. I can't believe that just happened. I've heard some things about James Blanchard. Their ability to evaluate is like none other in college football. I mean, I've heard some really glowing things about him, like really over the top. Like they are really, really good over there. That's where it stands. Where are you at with the whole situation and what Notre Dame is looking for out of their GM position?
Well, I think the one thing you got to know too is that no matter what anyone thinks about him, the fact that Texas Tech would like continue to be like, hey, we're going to keep giving you raises and we're going to keep, and he basically has as much autonomy or probably more autonomy than any other general manager in college football, right? Like,
yeah.
He is as close to a 50-50 partnership with their head coach, Joey McGuire, in terms of like what they do. Like basically McGuire's the only one who can say no to him about someone on the thing. Like everybody else, he's got full autonomy. And I don't know if that will be the case at Notre Dame. I imagine that it'll be like, something like that. Like he'll have a lot of power. He'll have a lot of power, but the reason that he got that, because he earned it. Like, you don't just give that to someone. He earned it, and he does have like a really good reputation for evaluation. He is a scout. He is, yes, he will be involved with recruiting and stuff like that, but it's not the same as Chad Bowden. It's why when they were looking at the job that originally went to Butler Benton, that was the one that they tried to offer to James Blanchard. Yeah. And Blanchard was going to be that guy, and Bowden would have been on the staff. And, that would have basically, it would have taken a lot of power away from Bowden, which is probably why he probably didn't want that to happen. Yeah. And he ended up kind of like muscling out Benton later on, right? So, but he is way more of a scout evaluator guy, a personnel guy, than Bowden is different than that. He's got, certainly that's part of Bowden, but there's other pieces to that too, right? So he obviously understands like he's got to do the other pieces of the GM job. It's not just like just scouting and stuff, but that is like the main thing for his job. That is why he has get hired. That's why he's gotten the power that he's got. That's why Notre Dame wants him. And I saw somebody, and I haven't had a chance to respond to it yet because I saw it like right before we started the podcast, but then said like, Notre Dame doesn't have trouble finding people. So why do they need this guy? And I'm like, everyone has trouble finding people. Like everyone wants to be better at evaluating and identifying players quicker, at finding any little edge that you can get. That's why, people, why do you think people don't want to lose Mike Mickens? Obviously, he's a great coach, but because Mike Mickens can say, Ben Morrison, that's the dude. Leonard Moore, that's that dude. Because you know what? There weren't other people saying that about those guys. They weren't. Not the way that he was, right? Mm-hmm. And there is something to that if you could do that. So I think that's kind of important, is like, you want to get a guy like Blanchard to come in and not lose what you have with these really good evaluators on Notre Dame staff. And I think there's been a lot of great evaluations, especially at camps, by a lot of these coaches, position coaches at Notre Dame, obviously Rudolph, Al Washington, Mickens, Max Bola, like a lot of guys, right, have had that. Dylan McCullough, right? Like all that's important. But the thing with Blanchard is he is someone that has like a track record of like finding people and offering people earlier. He's first in a lot of cases with a lot of guys, getting in early and identifying things. And, it's part of it is just being a grinder, but part of it he's like a good scout. Like he's got a good eye. Yeah. And, he knows what specifically kind of what he's looking for. He knows what like the vision of his head coach is looking for. And that's a big reason too why Texas Tech, like they made huge jumps in where their recruiting has gone. They went from the year before that McGuire and Blanchard got there, they were 62nd in the team talent composite. Well, they're 38th now in 3 years. That's a big jump.
That's huge. Yeah.
Right. That's a big jump. And especially for Texas Tech, because basically 62nd, they were a bottom 10, like power 5 at that time, conference, team in terms of talent, in terms of raw recruited talent. And now they are, upper part of the Big 12. That's a huge difference. Now, they haven't like torn up the Big 12 or anything. They're 23-16 in 3 years there, which is, that's good for Texas Tech, but it's not obviously what it is at Notre Dame. So it's a different challenge. There's different challenges at Notre Dame than there is at Texas Tech, but there's also way more opportunity at Notre Dame to go after guys that you couldn't get there. And you also have to understand that, hey, maybe this guy, maybe you can't offer, or you can offer a guy now, but it's like, you have to understand, hey, we're offering this guy, but he might not actually fit into here first. But that's not his job. Isn't to be the guy who's the admissions guy. Yes, he has to understand that part of it. Obviously, that's part of it. But his job is to identify the players. And if he's really good at that, which he has been, I mean, that's going to make Notre Dame better, which I think they've already done a pretty good job with, under Marcus Freeman. But like, just if you're enhancing that, that's the kind of edge. You make it to a national championship game.
Yes.
Think about if you had like 2 or 3 more guys that could make a difference in those games. That's huge. That's huge.
I mean, you always want, like, my thing with Notre Dame forever has been, there's no reason that you can't have the best thing or among the best things of kind of every aspect of the sport, in terms of like the best support staff, the best nutrition staff, the best athletic staff, right? The best facilities. Like, that's a choice, right? And it seems like Notre Dame is making the choice now that they are actually going to do that. They do want the best of everything, right? Now, it isn't to say if they don't get him, there's not another really good choice out there, right? It's not like no one knew James Blanchard's name before 2 days ago, right? Like, I mean, some people did, but most fans don't, right? And so there might be another name out there. Yeah, like there might be another name out there that is like, you know what, this guy does a really good job, or this lady, whoever it might be. Like, they do a really good job, right? And they would be good for Notre Dame. The point, though, is that it's like they are going hard after this person, and they're going hard because it's like you said, it's just that little bit of an edge that you can get, right? Talent acquisition is everything. If it's one more 4-star player that you got in on early, if it's one more 3-star sophomore that is going to turn into a 5-star that you get in on early, that's someone that you can get on your campus that is not someone else's campus. And like, you're always kind of a couple players away from that, right? A player or two can make a huge difference, and so like, that's what you want. And it also, like, this enhances something that was kind of lacking with like you said, with Chad. Like, Chad was tons of energy. He was everywhere all the time, is how I think of Chad. And like, that was great. And it took Notre Dame to a roster that was able to get to a national title game, right? But like, he wasn't the greatest evaluator. And you need that out of this position specifically now as a GM, right? And so like, that is so important for Notre Dame to have. And I think there's a reason that the money that they eventually offer to James Blanchard, they didn't offer to Chad. If Notre Dame, like, and we'll find out, right? I don't know this for sure, but I think it's going to take more than that. I believe they offered Chad about $750, right? And they didn't want to go higher than that with Blanchard. I think that they will go higher than that because I think they need to, if they land him. We'll see how it goes. But it just seems like Notre Dame is making a choice here, and it's kind of that way with Chris Ash as well. And I want to go back to a point that you made about Brian Kelly and Brian Van Gorder, and he like hired his buddy. Like, you say whatever you want about Marcus Freeman. If he doesn't think it's the right thing, he doesn't care who it is. He's not going to do it. He could have really said, you know what, we need to pay whatever we need to do to pay Chad Bowden. And he obviously did not do that. He could have just said, I'm going to elevate Mike Mickens. He's my best friend. He's going to be the defensive coordinator, and I'm going to help him out. He didn't do that. He didn't think it was better. He didn't think it was best for the program. And so they're not doing that, right? Sometimes he's hired people he knows, and sometimes he hasn't. But like, you say what you want about Marcus, he seems to have that gene of, if I don't think it's best for this program, I'm not doing it. Relationships be darned,
Yeah.
And say what you want about it. You got to kind of respect it. I mean, that's his way of doing things. And it's, we'll see where it goes, but that's how he's been. He's going to go after it. And Pete Bavacqua appears to want to go after it as well. That's really good for Notre Dame.
Yeah, I think it's great. And I think this is obviously someone who Notre Dame fans have brought up for years and years when they talk about like missed opportunities with players, with like Luke Kuechly, right?
Yeah.
everyone's like, man, Luke Kuechly wanted to go to Notre Dame. Oh man, he was this 3-star. They passed over him. He was going to Catholic school in Cincinnati and like ends up at BC and ends up being a great player. He's probably going to be an NFL Hall of Famer, all this kind of stuff. And that's like one of those regrets. It's like, oh man, remember when Notre Dame passed on Luke Kuechly? Like, because he was that good. But obviously, I mean, a lot of people passed on him. So it wasn't like Notre Dame was on their own. But if you think about it, if you have someone, and I'm not saying that, Blanchard is that guy, but I'm just saying, like, if you can get somebody that maybe you saw something in someone earlier, and maybe because other people are finding it out too, but you saw someone earlier. So even if it's just to establish a relationship earlier than someone else, like that is because if everybody could have gone, if people would have gone back in time, they would have, go back to 2 or 3 years ago, people would have offered Leonard Moore. People would have offered Bryce Young. They would have done all of these things to these guys like at that time. So any kind of edge you can get in getting these guys earlier, identifying them, maybe missing on something, because even the best teams, even Georgia, even Alabama, Ohio State, they have 3-stars that hit big. Like not all of them do. Like most of the guys are 5-stars and whatever, right? But Josh Jacobs, like that was a guy that was like, Alabama said, hey, he's like a high school quarterback who, was a great runner. Like, I think this guy can be like a pretty amazing running back, and like ends up being a 1st-round pick, right? Like it's those kind of things can even give those teams a boost and be the difference between being, close or winning it all.
Yep. So look, we're going to monitor that throughout the next couple of days. Keep an eye on things. As current, we don't have a planned show for tomorrow, but in this current climate, Jamie, you always got to be at the ready. So that's why you want to hit the notification bell so whatever it is, we might be coming live to you. We will end it there today. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. Of course, hit the like button, hit subscribe, hit the notification bell. So whenever it is, we might go live. Our next planned show is Monday. That'll be Power Hour with Mike and Jamie and myself on the 1s and 2s producing the show. But again, if Notre Dame makes a move with James Blanchard, we might throw something together quickly. We might throw together a live show, be it tomorrow or weekend's a little bit harder, but we'll see how it goes. So keep an eye out for things and keep monitoring Irish Sports Daily for updates. Matt hasn't slept, Jamie. I feel bad for him.
Yeah,
he's like delirious right now. He's not sleeping, but he's bringing people the updates, so that's very important. So, all right, have a good rest of your day, everyone. Have a good weekend. We'll see if we talk to you later. But in the meantime, keep hitting and hustling.